Hey everybody, welcome back to another session of Three Principles, Diction of the Three Principles. My name is Greg Suki, here with Harry Durbitsky, and we've got Dr. Bob Solomon back on today for a second show. Today we're going to talk about the oneness of spirit and psychology, as well as how the answer lies in the quiet chambers of the mind, as Sid Banks put it. So I'm really excited to talk about these topics, because there's a lot there. there's definitely a lot there. I don't know, we definitely enjoyed when Bob came on a couple of weeks ago, so we decided to bring him back to talk more about that, especially that connection between spirituality and psychology. So without further from me, I know Harry has something he'd like to say to kick this off.
Yeah. Hi, guys. This show is going to be a little different. I'm not going to go around asking questions. Only Greg is going to really do that. I'm coming on as a co-guest facilitator with Bob. And first of all, we will talk about the spirit and psychiatry rather than psychology, because Bob is a psychiatrist. And one of the things that struck me when in London was there aren't that many new speakers out there in the 3P world at the higher level. And Bob was presenting in London, and he was fantastic. And everybody really enjoyed his energy, because it was coming from an original feeling that I really appreciated. So, and I felt a connection with Bob there, which was interesting, because we were sitting beside each other at the rabbi's house, having a Shabbat lunch together. And as the longer I've been exposed to Bob, the more I've appreciated who he is. And when he talked 2 weeks ago, his first 20 minutes, there was a very strong spiritual element to his psychiatry approach. And I love that. I absolutely love that. And that's when I wanted to come on. So we're going to be the guests together this time, and Greg's going to do the monitoring and so on. And I'm going to not push for questions and stuff from you guys. Please ask us as many questions as possible. And I'm going to let Bob, I have lots to say, of course, because I'm Harry Durbitsky, but I'm going to ask Bob. We had a little discussion about this topic, which you could either start with spirit and psychiatry or the quiet chambers of the mind as expressed by Sid Banks. Now, I want to emphasize that's where Sid is talking about. He's not talking about all that psychological and you got to solve your problems and you're not perfect type of stuff. He's talking about the quiet chambers of the mind. In 1976, he put out a tape called The Quiet Mind. And to this day, it is still one of the most powerful messages he has. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Bob so he can get a few words in. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, thanks, Harry. Thank you for having me back. I really, really enjoyed being here 2 weeks ago, and it's such an honor to be here again and to share. And I really want this to be I have some things to say and then I've thought about, and I shared with Harry. We talked on Thursday, and it kind of propelled me to begin to do some thinking and reflecting about this topic, which is wonderful. And believe me, I don't even pretend to say that I have this all down. So I really hope to learn a lot from this conversation. And so I just wanted to say that. But here's something that I've been thinking about since Thursday, which I wanted to present and kind of bounce by you, Harry, and everyone else and see what you think. So a couple of weeks ago when I was here, I was mentioning that, the field of psychology, psychiatry now is more this illness-focused medical model, which really focuses on the fact that we have a mind, small m mind, our thinking, our analytical thinking more, and a body. And as Deepak Chopra says, it's like we are blobs of protoplasm that happen to think. And so psychiatry is really focused on trying to understand the biochemistry, the genetics and the biochemistry of human beings, and somehow when there are chemical imbalances, that we can change them through medication and that sort of thing. That's the perspective. And psychology has gone with looking at thinking like cognitive therapy and their analytical thinking. If we can just change our thinking from this distorted thinking to positive thinking, that's the answer. For me, that is a very two-dimensional way of seeing the world. And it misses a very, very important component that when you see it, it puts everything in perspective and makes everything make sense. And that is spirit. Spirit takes this two-dimensional way of seeing the world, which kind of promotes more of a illness-focused way. It's understandable why psychology and psychiatry went to this illness-focused model, because you think, oh my gosh, if people are not feeling good, it's because their biochemistry is wrong or their thinking's wrong. But when you see this third component, which I think is the more important, things go from two-dimensional to three-dimensional, and it puts everything in perspective, and everything makes sense. So what I want to share is, and I think what the principles point to, is really more the way things are, the truth of how things are, not just the way they seem to be. So this is what I want to share. When I think about us as human beings, and I think I'm going to ask a very large question. What is our purpose here? What are we doing here? When I think of that question, what comes to mind is that I don't see us as human beings as just these individual people that just have nothing to do with one another. But when you see the spiritual, that we are souls and a body. But those souls aren't just individual souls that are disconnected. There's a connection. And we are all connected together, these souls, and connected to source. As so well said, there were waves in the ocean. We're just waves in the ocean connected to our source, this divine. And that's part of this great oneness. So then if you ask the question, well then if that's true, and of course that's not original to me, then what is our purpose here? And our purpose here, for me, is to be of service to the divine, to be his servant. And if that's the case, then in order to be a servant of the divine, you have to have this connection, and as direct a connection as you possibly can. We have to be this conduit. So there has to be this open channel. So for me, the way I see ourselves is there's this universal communication system that's going on. And we are, as individuals, this communication system. But it goes beyond that. So how do we know when we are in this alignment? For me, that's what well-being is. When we experience as individuals this feeling of well-being, it's like this euphoric feeling. It's like what we're all looking for. But here's the thing, to put this in its broadest perspective, well-being is, we experience well-being not just for the sake of feeling good. That's just hedonistic. That's narrow a perspective. For me, this well-being is there to help us be aware that we are in alignment so that we can manifest our full purpose and potential in this world, that we can truly be servants of the divine. So then the question is, well, is there a way that we can deviate from that? And of course we can. And that gets the question, well, how do we get in our way? We get in our way and thus lose this connection when we get caught up in our personal egoic thinking. And to the extent this insecure egoic personal thinking. And then what happens is we begin to shift. And what happens is we don't get broken, we're just simply out of balance. And how do we experience that out of balance state? Symptoms. This out of balance state gets reflected in anxiety, depression, anger, irritability, frustration. But here's the thing, all that showing is telling us through this communication system that we're just out of alignment. It's a gift. It's the divine calling us back, wanting to be home. It's not a bad thing. In psychiatry and psychology, we think symptoms are the enemy. No, it's not the enemy. It's a gift. It's a way of saying that we're out of balance. And so here's the way it works. The beauty of the system is when we go out of balance, there is this, because of part of who we are, this oneness, there's this universal intelligence that we are a part of. Part of this universal intelligence, it informs us. There's this natural, innate energy that wants to bring us back into balance without having to do anything. That's the brilliance of the system. That's our natural capacity to self-heal, both physically, psychologically, and emotionally. That happens unconsciously, and within us, we can tune into that, these messages that we get from the quiet chambers of our mind, from this inner wisdom, that gives us messages as to what we need to do to make the adjustments to get back in balance, so we can experience our well-being. Why? For the bigger purpose of being connected to the divine, to manifest our true purpose. So that's what I wanted to share. To sort of, for me, it kind of ties a lot of things together. That's how I kind of see it. And I'd love your thoughts and input about that.
Well, let me give a few thoughts, and then we'll go into that. First, I love what you expressed and so on. It's beautiful. One of the things that Sid emphasized in the quiet chambers of your mind is living in an ordinary way. And what Bob was describing is what we see on the psychiatric and psychological and spiritual perspectives. But there's one other level that I'd like to talk about, and that is the ability to go into the quiet chamber, the quiet mind, and what it brings to you without any explanations, but you're just living and you're emptying your mind. You're getting rid of all that stuff without paying attention to it. And as you rest your mind, what happens is the gratitude and the spiritual reality unfolds and reveals itself. So we have the understanding that we need, and then we have the love. Sid always said love and understanding. And with the love that you experience inside yourself, you automatically not only rest, but you start to see unveiling levels of consciousness on a deeper and deeper level. When I went to Denmark, I stayed 3 days on Romo Island, and I had been doing a lot of sharing. I wasn't aware how tired I was. I was extremely tired, and I was supposed to spend that time with my friend Yannick, who passed away, but I was by myself, and the weather wasn't very good. The island was unbelievably unique and special, and I had a lot of quiet time. And what I experienced from this quiet mind was it prepared me so that what was coming later on in the movement of our spiritual development and our spiritual growth, I was fresh and alive for that, versus I was worn out by paying attention and sharing and doing all this stuff. And the rewards were a beautiful, beautiful, quieter and quieter and quieter feeling. And the quieter I got, the easier it was to see. The quieter I got, I started to get back into what Bob was talking about, that's connection. Because Bob is pointing something very, very profound. We want this connection to be alive. And as we step into this quieter feeling of life, what happens is clarity, understanding of our own wisdom, and more importantly than all of that, somehow we connect to the oneness of life. And when we connect to the oneness of life, then when you go to Bob, he can then, like we're hopefully going to do here, discuss where that can go, where that can take us. And from that feeling, that's what they're teaching on Salt Spring. Right now, there's a conference on Salt Spring. They're teaching you about the silence. They're teaching you about going into there. And then your own reflections start to provide the healing that you need to have, and so on. So that's all I got to say right now. So maybe, Greg, you could see if you could get a question or two from people.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anybody has a question or comment, go ahead and you can either unmute yourself, or in the participants tab, you can click the hands up button or raise hand button, and I'll go ahead and call on you. But definitely like what you guys were saying, especially Bob, when you're talking about it's just, we're not sick, we're not broken, we're not damaged, we're just kind of slightly off track. You know, we're just, you know, we've skewed from that centered place. And it's kind of, you know, think of like a pendulum. Thoughts are like the energy that pushes that pendulum. And the more we get caught up in our thinking, the farther we push it and the bigger our swings are. And the more we get caught up in all the emotions, I'm not even talking about what we call bad emotions. I don't differentiate between the two, but even, you know, the really high highs, the really exciting times, you know, they're not meant to be permanent either. And what I've found, you know, with coming across this understanding of the three principles is that, you know, that quiet place in my mind is really I've become contented with being contented. Whereas before I thought I always had to be chasing the really fun times, or the, you know, let me go get high, let me go get drunk, let me go to, you know, I always had to chase the really fun times. And I've really learned to just, I enjoy contentment more now, I guess is the best way to put it. And even, you know, last night I went to a big music jam, and it wasn't really, I wasn't going for that excitement of it. I was going for the energy that the people carry there, because people come to that jam with just no expectations for the night. They just go to enjoy whatever's happening in the moment. And it's always such a great time because of that. And I end up having great conversations with people, and just, it's because of that everybody kind of lets their guard down and stops pushing that pendulum just for that night, because they're just going to just enjoy the moment. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I actually love silence now. It used to scare me. I can't be quiet. I have to have music going. I have to be doing something. I have to go somewhere. And sometimes I just like to just sit and be quiet for a little while.
And I mentioned several times, Greg, in the native world, the person who can live in the silence by themselves, that's their definition of wisdom. The same definition that Sid has, he just doesn't use that metaphor. So what you're saying is extremely beautiful. And the other thing that it seems that the silence does, because I noticed with Bob, is it spurs fresh genius ideas. Bob's talking on a totally different level than he was talking on Thursday. Wouldn't you agree, Bob?
Yes, absolutely.
It's amazing, the difference, in fact. It's like night and day, you know, and his clarity and his understanding in his field he's become a genius in a very short period of time. Like you have, Greg, you know, you become geniuses. You know, it's just beautiful to see. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can see how Greg his wisdom is starting to come out from doing these programs, especially lately, and its genius is coming out. And when I first saw him, I could feel that genius in him. And same with Bob. I felt something really special in Bob. He's human, he's real, and he cares. I mean, Greg cares. And, you know, Tanya cares. Certainly Bob cares. You know, and when Patty shared what she shared, she cared. You know, it's beautiful.
For me, it's so beautiful that it's like, I don't think there's anything special about me or Greg or you.
No, nothing at all. Zip.
Not us.
Nada, absolutely. That's the miracle.
That's the miracle. It's that for me, it just feels so wonderful that we are connected to something greater than us. It's not just about little, I'll talk about me now, not just individual me. That would be an awful feeling if I just felt like completely alone on this planet and there was nothing else. I mean, there was individual people, it would be this purposeless, meaningless life. But to realize that we are connected to something greater, first of all, and when we go into the quiet of our minds, you can just feel, for me, it's this wonderful, supportive feeling, a feeling like I'm just held in the arms of the divine. This beautiful feeling of love. And if I didn't realize that, I would just feel all alone and more likely to get caught up in this insecurity of my thinking and thus become more insecure and more anxious and more. But that's why the answer for me as a psychiatrist is to help people to see that we are part of something greater, because just realizing that in and of itself is so incredibly, it's the answer. It really is. It's not chemicals. It's not giving drugs. It's not helping people change their thinking. No, it's just realizing the way things are, that we are part of something greater. That's how I see it.
And that's unbelievable. It doesn't make sense. And yet it's true. I mean, for me, when you see it, just makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, on one level, yeah. On another level, I can't figure it out, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense to me now. If you would have talked to me a couple of years ago, it wouldn't have made any sense.
Right.
You know, like I said, I was always looking for that excitement, but when you're pushing the pendulum in one direction, it always has to go back the other direction.
Which is why for me,
chasing those highs always ends up with lows, in my experience. And I think that's a lot of where the addictive patterns come from, is you're pushing toward that really good feeling, not realizing that where you're supposed to be is in that contentment place in the middle, which sounds boring, but it's really actually a great place to be. But every time you push it in one direction, it swings in the other direction. And then you're fighting that direction, trying to push it back to the fun side. And it's this constant struggle back and forth of going up and coming down and going up and coming down. And when you stop pushing, you end up in that place of just peace and quiet and love. And there's really no better place to be.
And that's why, for me, realizing this connection with our source is the answer. This is if you didn't realize that, yes, you would desperately search any way you could outside of yourself to feel better.
Right.
But if you know, and that's why for me, the principles are, the most important part is realizing that we are part of this source, and to realize that connection. That is the anchor we're looking for. And we experience that anchor as our well-being, which is within us. It's not outside of us.
That's the key for all of us, is the spiritual side of life. I'm convinced of it as I work more and more in addiction, as I work more and more sharing people. People like the psychological side. It's very interesting and invigorating and so on. But the effects are not as big as it's a spiritual healing. And, you know, Elsie once said at a school, all insights are spiritual. They may manifest as a look of psychological relief or psychiatric relief, but they're all spiritually at the source. And that's what Sid was pointing us towards, was the source. You go to the source and forget about all the rest of the stuff. And when the psychologist came to him at Cedar Beach in Salt Spring Island in 1977, when he had his first talk, he just added one sentence to what he was saying. Before, he was talking about what mind is. Now, mind, just for your definition, in the native world, he says, don't use mind, thought, and consciousness. Use spirit, thought, and consciousness. So I'm just saying spirit mind, whatever you want to call it. And so he said what the mind is, that's what he talked about before the psychologists and psychiatrists, all those idiots came, excuse the expression. I had to take a stupid joke. And they weren't idiots. They were great. But he said, what the mind is, and that's what he talked about, but except he said it's spiritual. And then he added another sentence, and that's all he did. And how it relates to life. And that's the psychological and how it relates to life. And that's it. That's all he told the psychiatrists and psychologists, and they took it into an understanding. And then as he understood that he had to keep pointing towards the spiritual side of life, he saw and he heard that it had to be in some kind of form that people could relate to, and the three principles evolved. And as you and I, all of us understand, I don't know to this day how he saw those three principles, because it just doesn't make any sense to my mind how anyone could see it. And yet, of course, he did. And I was watching a show yesterday that said in each major time, one prophet comes to enlighten the world, to take him to a deeper level of understanding. And of course, Christ would be an example, and Buddha and Muhammad and so on. But this generation, it's Sid Banks, and he put together these three principles to bring in the spiritual, psychological, psychiatric connection to life. And we're privileged to be able to even discuss this topic like we are. And it will solve all your problems, which is just absolutely amazing. I mean, how could it solve all our problems?
Because they don't actually exist.
Well, there you go. We've
created them. They are self-created, so they're self-solved.
Beautiful. Wow.
But I'd like to point out one big important point is that every single one of us is capable of having the same experience as Sid had. Sometimes it'll happen in small increments. Sometimes, it'll be a few jumps here and there, but every single one of us has access to that. And that's a big thing that tends to get lost in a lot of messages from the prophets of the past, is people start worshiping other parts of it and forgetting the fact that they're always pointing inside of us. The quiet chamber of the mind. I mean, it makes me think of when Jesus was talking about the secret place. I mean, we only have one place that's a secret from everybody else.
Yeah.
Seriously, anywhere else you can have a secret room in your house and eventually somebody will find it. You could have a secret place out in the middle of the woods and be there alone, and suddenly somebody comes walking up and happens to find it. But there's only one true secret place.
It's true. But here's the challenge, if I may bring a challenge in here, is that, and I know this from my own experience, it can feel very scary going into the quiet.
Oh,
and I think, yes. And I think that's why many people don't want to go there, and why it's so easy to get caught up in all the stimulation of our world, is because it keeps you from this quiet that we're talking about. So that's the challenge we have, is how do we help a world to be comfortable with the quiet chambers of the mind, who are resting in spirit? I think it's a challenge. What are your thoughts about that?
Maybe ask somebody else, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it looks like Patty has her hand up.
I'd love to know what people think.
No, I'm thinking though.
Yeah, you unmuted yourself.
I know. It's the secret place of the Most High. It's not the secret place where I can brood over my troubles and how life is terrible, but it's that place where I can ascend and connect to my own divinity. But man, we live in this other world where all those problems look so real. And I was just at my spiritual community this morning, and I'm like, but if you only knew what the real secret is, it's not in the scripture. I mean, scripture is really cool. They're really fun stories and I love them. But the answer is in the secret place of the Most High. And it's in here. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I had to come to this call because I was not in that secret place. I'm preparing a Father's Day meal and trying to get everything out, time, and it's not important.
Do you know what happens, Patty? Just relax and be patient with it, because what we're talking about has just happened to us. We didn't do it. I would have loved to say I was responsible with my, wisdom and what. But that's not the truth. You just keep sharing those beautiful feelings you have, and that will bring where the reality just suddenly looks different to you. And Sid was always pointing towards that it's a spiritual world first, not a material world first. He said, of course, we were living here in this thing, but this thing that you want to unveil, that's called unveiling levels of consciousness. And as you unveil it, it becomes realer and realer. And none of us in this room, what Tanya has experienced and what everybody in this room has experienced is just the privilege of unveiling levels of consciousness. And your gift is to appreciate where you are, period. I promise you have gratitude for where you are and the wonderful gifts that God or Spirit has given to you. That will funnel the growth you're looking for. You want to live where you are,
Right.
Not where I am or
Right.
Bob is, or that will do it. I promise. It's like honesty. You've got to be honest who you are. If every time I pretend, well, the rest of that story. So appreciate that.
And when you're in that place where you feel a little off, just think of that pendulum. Just think your thoughts have pushed the pendulum, and you don't have to do anything to get it to stop. You just wait.
I don't have to come on one of these calls?
You don't have to, but it's nice.
Yeah, we love having you. So the answer is, yeah, you have to still do that. You have to be dependent on this show, or else we're going to be very disappointed. And my self-esteem is going to go down.
But then you wouldn't need a double door to get your head out of the house. I'll just
Yeah, of course. One bad joke deserves another. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm good at bad jokes.
So, Tanya, can you tell? I'm going to ask you anyway. You have stepped into a higher level of consciousness. That's pretty obvious. Like, how do you see you catapulted yourself into a more succulent feeling? And when we define succulent feeling, we go back to our topic, the quiet chambers of your mind, because you can't have a succulent feeling without the quietness of your mind. So I just wonder how you see that.
I can't pinpoint or tell you. I mean, I can say in the last year, it's slowly, gradually feeling that there's deeper levels of consciousness and the more awareness I have of the real problem, which is just my thinking. I've also had 9 years before this year of knee deep in the recovery world. There are pointers to the truth in that world too, the 12 steps and Bill W.'s message. And so I've had glimpses of that. I've had some time, 10 years, if you will, of trying to, getting to this moment in terms of, if we're talking about seeking the truth, I can't really tell you how and that catapulted term, just in the last year, it just once hearing about the three principles and then talking with, Greg and yourself and reading the literature and watching videos and getting quiet while doing all that. And then, I don't know, I mean, there's also something to be said for me about, I know I can't stop this crazy stuff that goes on in my head. I can't stop it, but action, I get up and I get out, I exercise, I eat well. I mean, there's certain things as well that help with well-being, right? If I just sat around and just sort of read books and listened to videos and did this kind of thing and not got up and did physical stuff and get out amongst communities and be around people and do all of this life stuff, I mean, there's something to be said about the action piece for me too, a big part of it. But definitely once hearing about the three principles, it just kind of then put it all together for me and was like, oh, okay, so that's what, that was the bigger pointer to the truth for me. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but.
One of the things that confused me about Bob was I was wondering where he got his spiritual presence from. And maybe you could tell us, Bob, a little bit of how you see it. We talked a little bit about that, but how you, I mean, you're in a real clinical environment on one level, and you've been able to divorce, like Patty brought up the material world and the thoughts and the way it is, and it's hard to break away for a psychiatrist from all that training and so on, and yet you've managed to like Greg, retain the innocence of your soul rather than, being caught up in the rhetoric of your profession, which must be horrendous, I would imagine. So,
well, so I have to tell you and then get a little bit into my background, which is the reason I went into psychiatry was really from my own personal work, my own personal psychological work. And I happened to work with people, and this is before medical school, during medical school. And I happened to work with people for a number of years who were more spiritually aware and spiritually involved. I had the good fortune. And so when I decided to become a psychiatrist, which was actually 6 years after medical school, I knew there was a lot more out there than just giving medication or, psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy. So I was always interested in the more, at some level, spiritual aspect. And then when I learned about the principles 8 years into practice. So I was always interested in more kind of alternative ways of working, even from the very beginning. And then 8 years after my practice, that's when I found the principles. And that's what really took me off. And that's when I began to really explore spirituality, which was 17 years ago. And I've continued to explore that very deeply. Because I wanted to know even what I've been interested in learning about is about healing. How do people heal? And we don't learn that in psychiatry. We learn how to fix people, but we don't really learn about healing. And so through a variety of ways, and I've become interested in that and explored that. So my background is an unusual background. So I've always taken psychiatry and put it in perspective. I mean, it has something to offer, certainly, and I draw upon that training, but I draw upon the best of it that I think is valuable. But there's a whole other world, and of course, that's what we're talking about today, is the spiritual realm, and that's what my field so desperately lacks. So, I don't know if that answered your question. I don't know if I...
Oh, it did. It's beautiful. You brought a beautiful feeling into the room. Great. Maybe I could share an experience I had, because I come from the opposite way of Greg, in the sense that I have taken 0 psychology courses, and I hated psychology and psychiatry with a passion when I was on Salt Spring Island. I had a huge prejudice against it. Why would anyone want to talk about being bummed out. It just didn't make any sense to me. And they seemed to like to talk about that. And within that, I developed a strong negative attitude towards psychology. And that negative attitude really held me back for years and years and years. And then as I started to evolve, because I was all my insights and everything I cared about was spiritual, I started to teach the psychological and the spiritual connection, but I didn't understand it because I hadn't experienced it. And so even though I had all of these great words that we learned through the three principles and so on, I wasn't aware that what I was teaching was bogus. And so I had the concepts of thoughts and stuff, but I went to the school and I decided to go to the school in Salt Spring, and I didn't care about anybody else. I was tired of this networking and all this stuff. I just relaxed and said, "The hell with it. I'm just gonna be peaceful and just gonna enjoy myself." And this feeling came in, and I happened to be lucky to have a house. Jim Beck was away, and he gave me his house on Salt Spring, and it was quiet. I had a fire, and I had food, and I'm sitting there in the quietness, really quiet, just letting my mind just kind of. And all of a sudden I said, Jesus, Elsie described her experience. A thought creates a feeling, and that's psychological. I said, that doesn't make sense. Elsie's not psychological. She's spiritual. It brought a confused concept in my mind, and a beautiful, like it unearthed something, where I needed, it was digging into something where I could see, this is interesting. And I went back the next morning. I was going to ask her about it, but they got into sharing your reflections and your insights and stuff. I didn't want to interfere with that. So I'm sitting back there, and as she's there, she doesn't know she answers the conundrum I have. And the conundrum, she says, all insights are spiritual. And all of a sudden I said, it was like a snake went around me. And about 10 layers of skin got removed from me. I'm telling you, this is what I experienced. Just ripping away. And I was just, all of a sudden, I was like 50 pounds lighter. And all of a sudden, the snake was the spiritual and the psychological are one.
Right.
And at that point, I would have to say I was starting to teach from my own insight.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And for me, it is one and the same. And I think that's been known since the dawn of time. And if we look at psychology, just even in the word, it's the study of soul.
Study of what? Sorry?
Soul. The soul of spirit.
Oh, soul. Okay, sorry.
That's really what it is. For me, it's all one and the same. So it makes sense that what Elsie's saying is that when we have insight, for me, it's the voice of the divine speaking through us. That's what I see insight is, and that's where true change comes. Is from that place, not from our mind, not from our personal thinking. You can spin forever around that. What we're looking for is something greater. And for me, what the greater is just the calling to want to come home, back to this connection. And that's why, if we can allow ourselves just to open up and to open this channel up and allow this connection and conduit to happen, the feeling we get is this feeling of well-being. There's nothing like it. This pure contentment, this love, this gratitude. It's what we're all looking for. But again, I keep coming back to this because I think it's so, I guess I'm trying to put it in perspective too, because what it's all ultimately about is manifesting our greater purpose in this world, which is to be of service in this world in whatever way we are meant to be of service. And every one of us has come into this world to manifest that in our own individual way. We all have our individual assignments in this world. And that's what life for me is all about. That's the bigger picture for me.
Simple, but profound.
But that's where the power comes in, seeing the simplicity. And that's what Sid was all about, is being able to simplicity. I mean, I feel, I have to say, when I think of Sid, I feel very humbled because, I mean, for me, what I'm sharing, it kind of feels very crude, but I think Sid's brilliant. I can't even imagine how he saw it, because I just imagine the clarity that he saw all of this.
He said it was a fluke.
Is that what he said?
He said absolute, right to his dying days. He said it was just a fluke. Just the roll of the dice, just happened to be him.
So what if he saw it the exact same way you're seeing it? He just had different words for it.
That's would be his message, Greg. What you just described. He was not about his power or his insight. It was about all of 100% right from the beginning inside you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a very good point. That is a very good point.
One person once asked him, this is, I'm not going to mention the guy's name, said, "Are you Jesus Christ?" And he said, "We all are."
Wow.
That's the truth. I wouldn't be feeling what I feel now, even though it's not what Sid Banks is experiencing, if it wasn't true. It's the same for all of us in this room.
It's interesting. Sorry.
I was just going to say, even the least among you.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the beauty of our area, by the way. What you mentioned, Greg, is the last shall be first. And, and I experience this quite a bit in working with addiction or to people who are suffering, or natives, of course. You have this crumpled up old face, pruned face, which with the heaviness of the world, looking 90 years old. And out comes this purity of wisdom that is like, takes you up an elevator, and you ride this elevator up to where they are, and they know it. They know it. And they're just as surprised as we are when we express it. But they take us. So we can't get caught up in the outside manifestations of the problems that people are. When you live and work and live in the native world, let me tell you, the biggest drunk I ever knew had the same wisdom that Sid spoke, and he shared it with me. But when I came into the territory, he stopped drinking because he respected that I was coming in, and he wanted to share that goodness. And then I'd leave, and guess what he'd do? Back to the bottle. But his wisdom, he'd take me out into nature, and he'd describe this connection, the spirit of the rocks and the spirit of the water, from the ancient wisdom perspective. And that's all Sid is, ancient wisdom. That's all Bob is ancient wisdom with a modern twist called psychiatry. Great, it's ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
Came from deep within the beginning of time. And that's where the native Indians say, thought originates.
It's from the wisdom from within, the deep chambers, quiet chambers of the mind. That's what you.
Yeah.
Can I share an insight and experience I'm having right now? I want to share something.
Please do.
That I'm feeling. That, as we shared earlier, Harry, when we connected on Thursday and we shared a little bit, I felt this connection with you, and from that, things began to percolate for me. And I began to have more insight about what we're sharing today. And what I want to share is that being in the room here, I feel this connection with all of you. And as and with that connection is through the conversation, I'm getting more insight and I'm seeing things more deeply. And it kind of feels like I'm kind of rising up, and this feeling of a high almost. And it's really an amazing thing, and it just feels so incredibly good. But I guess what I want to share relative to what this is about, it's coming through this connection with all of this container that's created here. And then through me, this wonderful feeling is coming up within me through our connection. And it's nothing in the outside world, outside of me. It's through the spiritual connection that's happening within all of us, from the inside out, not the outside in. I guess that's what I want to share. It's so powerful that I guess I'm just emphasizing another point that we really don't need anything material outside of us. It's all about the spiritual connection within us and with everyone in this oneness. And that's what we're looking for.
And the collective consciousness that we're all sharing together. What we're talking about is not coming from us, it's coming from all of us.
Yes.
And that has to be seen as the truth. It's not a lie or a propagandist thing. It's a collective consciousness that allows it. Whoever talks it sounds like it's coming from them, but it's actually coming from the collective consciousness.
Right.
And if you step into that, that's why Sid was always saying it's you. It's you who are creating this thing, because any moment you could get pissed off or get in. It's you, and that's that. When I met with Bob, I could feel that the same thing I could feel with Greg, and same thing with you, Bob. I could feel it with you. You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yes.
You know, I meant Bob. I don't know what his Bob Shell.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Wrong Bob.
No, I totally agree, and I have the same feeling that you're describing, Bob. It's really interesting. Everything you shared with the connection, and that's what it's all about, is exactly the same way I feel. And over the last few years, that connection seems to have gotten deeper and deeper, and my ego seems to have gotten more and more out of the way. And things just, life is smoother. Things run better. One of the interesting things is Marty Cashel and I run 3 Principles discussion groups, and we had somebody a couple of weeks ago at our group, and I had asked her how things were different since she learned the 3 principles. And she's really gotten into it now, even more so just in the last few weeks. But she said she just goes around now and feels more gratitude for things. She said, I used to take all kinds of things for granted, and now I don't take anything for granted. I look at the smallest thing, and it's like a miracle to me. And I thought that was really interesting how that showed up in her life.
Absolutely.
One other thing I'd like to share is Michael Neal started something he called the Advanced Course, which I recognize a couple of people here are on that. And he mentioned that many people have these enlightenment experiences. And once they have, and this, it was kind of the same with Sid, and they'll have the enlightenment experience and they don't really know exactly what happened. They can't explain it, but they tend to glow for a while. And then after a while, they want to try and share it with other people so that they can experience the same thing. And apparently Sid found a spectacular way of sharing it after several months of not really, sharing it with people. He found this way with the 3 principles that's just going around the world now, and it's amazing. And several of us are all out there sharing the same thing or trying to do it the best we know how. So thank you so much for coming on here and, sharing what you shared.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Bob and I are going to write a paper on this subject. Maybe Greg will join us too, I don't know. And maybe Bill Pettit or something. But Bob and I want to write a paper on this because I really feel what we talked about today is very, very important and can really help point the field of psychiatry, which I think is probably one of the toughest areas to penetrate in the direction that will help people to understand on a practical level what we're talking about. And so I want to thank everybody for, allowing us to investigate this a little more, and the beautiful sharing you all did, and allowing us to step into it a little bit in a beautiful way. And I must admit, I just feel very honored to be right in the middle of two beautiful human beings who also really made major contributions in this area, as the rest of you did. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. I feel the same way. And I learned a tremendous amount today. And thank you.
Oh, you jumped big time, Bob.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, very exciting. And I agree how important this is. Very important.
Yeah, so we'll write a paper on it, and then we'll present it to the group, and then who knows where it will go, eh?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the beginning of something very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the end, the beginning.
That's right. Yeah, me too. All right.
All right. Bye, everyone. All the best. Take care.
Okay. Greg, you want to, and mention maybe who we have next week coming on. Greg.
You have a treat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Treat Bob for sure.
It's a treat. Yeah.
So, Eddie.
Yeah, it was great having you on here. I thought we had a topic next week.
Well,
I don't remember now. Oh, that's right. Bill is next week, and then the topic.
Bill Pettit. That's what I'm saying. It's a treat.
Yeah, it says absolutely to continue with our psychiatric theme. Now you notice, maybe I'll wrap it up. You notice that we had Bob come on first, and he shared psychotherapy with us, and then we talked. Greg and I did relapse, which I consider one of our neatest, most interesting programs. And then now we've talked about the mystical and spiritual side of psychiatry. And Bill will continue. That's basically the topic for next week that I suggested for Bill. And so this psychiatry month has been, so far 3 out of 4 has been very, very successful in its introduction to a little deeper understanding of what the heck it is and all this stuff. So
I just want to say, Bill has some wonderful, very unique insights to this field. I wouldn't, don't miss it.
That's what I think too. I don't intend to miss it, but, but who knows?
I was saying to the group.
Yeah.
Whoever is listening in here, it would be good.
And you're of course welcome to join, Bob, if you.
And happy Father's Day, everybody! I'm off in a few minutes. My daughter is throwing a little Father's Day for me. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's kind of good to be a dad, especially when they loving dad. And it'd be a lot of fun. And of course, I have my 2 grandkids there too. So I'm bringing him little pieces of chocolate. And so these granddads, they spoil their kids. There's no doubt about it. And love it, and love spoiling them. That's the problem, So good to see you. Nice to see you, Tanya. Really beautiful. Thank you very much, all of you. Fantastic. And see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.